In this week's jam-packed episode, we talk about driverless cars, why you should be concerned about supply chain VAT fraud, and a little book on tax that's entertaining. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6- and 7-figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancock, is a finance director, chartered accountant, and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow, and grow your business. Right, Claire, here we go again.
Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day, isn't it?
It is. Even the best businesses fail sometimes, don't they?
Well, I think you're being a bit over-optimistic about our own abilities there by calling us the best businesses, but there we go.
And that is the news that we've already recorded this podcast once, but I lost it. So this one should be really polished because this was super rehearsed, wasn't it? So
yeah, so we maybe need to upgrade our podcast studio.
Our equipment.
It's not the equipment, it's the software.
Yeah,
actually, I think it's
I stick my hands up. Like, it's never happened
user
before.
error.
It just is what it is. Definitely user error, but yeah, mistakes can happen. So anyway, should we find out what this week's news story of the week is, Claire?
So you are majorly excited about this week's news story of the week, aren't you, Simon?
Literally.
You've been going on...
Jumping through hoops about the way this is progressing, yeah.
You've been going on about this for years now. So a brief backstory of Simon. He used to drive about an hour and a half, 2 hours to Heathrow Airport quite regularly. And one of the things that he used to complain about was how much work he could get done in his car if we had driverless cars that didn't require a driver. And This is what the news story of the week is all about, isn't it, Simon?
That is why when I read this story, are you ready for driverless cars by 2026, potentially? I was literally so excited. Now, in my utopia, I think I need to just paint the picture of what this looks like for me so people understand where I'm coming from. I'm very frustrated. I get very frustrated about the waste of time when you're driving long journeys because you can't do anything but drive the car and you can't be productive, and that time could be used so much better. In my little utopia, we don't own cars anymore as individuals.
No.
There is just cars driving around all the time, electrically powered, so they're ultra clean, but I just tap my app a bit like Uber. A car, because there's so many everywhere, literally is 30 seconds away at any given time from anywhere I am. So turns up outside our house,
We're talking about taxis here, aren't we? Driverless taxis, essentially.
Absolutely.
But because people don't own cars,
there won't be any requirement for cars. So everything will be a taxi, won't it?
Yeah, everything becomes a taxi.
Yes.
And I must say, actually, Simon, I once worked on a project with a global electrical wholesaler, and we were working on the strategy for rolling out electric charging stations.
Sure.
And I met with some of the big car manufacturers and some of the big utility companies and town planning people, and this was also something that they were talking about. They were talking about our town centre car parks becoming these hubs, almost a little bit like, for anybody that remembers Brum, how Brum used to go back to its garage every day.
Right.
And that these car parks we've got in town centres will become like these charging destinations, the docking places.
Cars,
so the taxis are sort of based there, and when they need to go back there to charge, and they sleep there overnight, and that becomes, because individuals won't need to drive into the town and park their car anymore. They'll just call a taxi and get a taxi into town.
This is absolutely the vision of how it should be, and
other people share this vision too, Simon. So maybe your utopia will exist.
Elon. I'm sharing it with Elon.
No, not Elon Musk. No. I can't name who we met with, but this was not one company saying this would be the case. This was big car retailers, Shell, electrical people like that doing these charging stations. They're talking about this as well.
So this is, it's very exciting because there's a few other benefits to this. Nobody needs driveways anymore. So the whole world just looks beautiful because everyone has beautiful gardens again. Everybody's house looks beautiful at the front. And of course, a car doesn't even need to be a car. It can literally be like an office on wheels. I imagine they'd be built totally different. There'd be a desk in the middle. There'll be 4 seats around it. You sit, you work, you socialize on that journey. Absolutely genius. But I just love this idea. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent here. That's my vision. The reason that we're talking about this is because Britain has passed the British Roads Automated Vehicles Act in 2020.
You're right, Simon. Spit your bloody words out. Basically, we passed a law.
The Autonomous Vehicles Act, which basically paves the way for regulation to allow these driverless vehicles to be on our roads from the year 2026, which is really soon.
And what's different about this is, we all know in other countries there, and even in the UK, there's a high level of automation on cars already. You can put on cruise control and various other things that means cars brake for you and things like that. But this is quite significant because I believe this would be the first country in the world where we're not requiring a driver to be sitting in the driver's seat anymore. And that's what makes this really different from laws that, maybe if you've been in America and you've seen, Teslas on the road where they're driverless, but you won't be required to sit in the driver's seat and be the driver of the vehicle. You can just simply be a passenger. And I think that's what makes this really quite significant, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole ethical issue around what happens with these cars when they have to make difficult decisions. So this article talks a lot about, the car that has to make that decision, that when they know an accident's going to happen, they are making a computerized calculated decision between, the child on one side of the path and the elderly person on the right. And one of them has to go because there's no other option because the truck's coming towards you, so to speak. And it's making that calculated decision based on the age of those person, how much more life they've got to live. So it takes out the elderly lady. Now, that's a really challenging thing for people to get their head around. Now, a human being wouldn't calculate that in the same way, but somebody ultimately is going to be felt like they're liable at the end of that. And how do the corporations deal with that? I think there are definitely challenges ahead, but it has to be safer because at the moment, at least these machines will be 100% focused on what they're doing. We're on telephones. We've got kids in the back screaming at us. We've got the radio on. We're distracted when we're driving. So I actually believe that this is interesting. And I do believe there is a good future here where safety standards can actually go up, but I don't think they can be eradicated. And that is...
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, there's been a couple of Tesla stories tragically hit the news where a couple of people have died, where they've had driverless vehicles that have been... Tesla has been in charge of the vehicle and a couple of people have died because of it. But when you think about how many driverless Teslas there are in America, and I think it's only 2 fatalities so far. So they are so much safer than people, because at the end of the day, most road traffic accidents are caused, I'd say all. I can't think of an example where a road traffic accident is not a user error on some part. So from that perspective, it would make our roads a lot safer. And I think there are an awful lot of benefits. And our nearest town is Milton Keynes, isn't it? And they have been trialling these. So Milton Keynes is quite famous. It was built in the 60s and it's got a grid system, lots of roundabouts and grids. And it's been used for a lot of testing. And we've had these cars completely driverless, driving around Milton Keynes for a couple of years now, doing tests and trialing it, and that's where they're doing a lot of programming for it. So there's not been any issues in Milton Keynes at all. And we've also got the little driverless robots, haven't we, doing like Deliveroo and Uber Eats deliveries and things like that as well, co-op deliveries. So
doing that type of thing. I just hope that this does move forward at a pace that I can use it while I'm young enough and healthy enough. Well, arguably it's better when you're older because you can't drive anyway. But I just want to be able to use this in my life. This is one of the few things, and I'm really grateful for the internet and technology that's come along. But I just want to be able to go out and have a drink and just get a taxi back that's instant. I just want the reliability of that. We have taxis around here, but they're just so unreliable, and you can't go out knowing whether you can even get a taxi when you call them to come
most
back.
Of the cost of a taxi is probably the wages,
fuel
isn't
and
it?
the wages. Well, most of it's the labour, then secondary the fuel. You take the fuel out because it's electrically powered. That's much cheaper. And you take the labour out. All of a sudden, the cost of also being able to get around the we've had digital connectivity. This is the next evolution of physical connectivity, isn't it? This is so exciting for me.
And also, if you start to plug technology. So one of my YouTube videos that I did, I think last week, was about sweating your asset and how if you own an asset, you need to
YouTube channel.
You need to utilise it as much as possible. And just thinking about how much the cost of taxis will reduce if you haven't got labour, you haven't got fuel, but also you've just these cars are completely programmed to do the most efficient route, and when the utilisation increases so much, then the cost per mile decreases so much because you don't you potentially got a taxi that could literally work flat out for 10 hours a day.
I mean, theoretically, you'd never hit traffic because the computer and the AI algorithm would be so clever. It would be talking to each car to make sure that they're all moving in different ways. I mean, it's endless, the possibilities.
Yeah,
I love
the possibilities are endless, aren't
Great news story, and one I'm particularly excited about. So let's watch this space. And if it does develop any further, we're definitely going to report more on it, because this is one that's dear to my heart. I love it.
And if there are any driverless car vehicles that would like to sponsor the podcast, feel free to reach out to marketing@profitcashgrowth.com.
Great. And we're going to move on to this week's deep dive, where Claire's going to talk about a kitten principle, apparently. Let's see.
Yeah, Simon, it's not a kitten principle. It's called the Kittel principle.
Kittel. Sorry. It's these double
with
glasses.
An L.
I should have took my glasses off and put my reading ones on. I was like, what's this kitten principle we're talking about? The Kittel
principle.
Okay. What does this mean? And, the title of this video is Why We Should Be Concerned About Supply Chain VAT Fraud.
Yeah.
You scared me to death there. So can you just please expand and then we'll go forward with this?
Okay. So this, I'd say not many accountants know about this. I don't
think anybody knows about this but you, Claire, which is, you're at the cutting edge of education on this podcast, because you are bringing stuff that people just aren't going to be being told by their accountants.
Well, look, the reason why I've picked up on this is because, one, I have a weird liking of every time there's a HMRC tribunal, they publish the full documents and the court decision on an online portal, and you can go and read them all. And what I've noticed is there is a distinct increase in the number of businesses being caught out by this. And I think a lot of people aren't even aware that this is a thing. And so I think it's really important to be talking about. The reason why I think this is really important to be talking about right now is because Labour have been very open about closing the tax gap, and closing the tax gap is a way that they're going to fund some of their spending. Yeah. And this is essentially tax evasion. And so therefore, it's very likely that an increase in inspections and queries and court cases and things like that relating to the Kittel principle is likely to increase.
Okay, so what is this? Because
okay,
I'm confused already. So bring it back in and
so
give me
what
clarity.
This essentially means is that you don't have a right to reclaim VAT on your invoices if the supplier is committing VAT fraud. Okay. So if you receive an invoice from your supplier and it's got £10,000 of VAT on it, and that business never pays that VAT over to HMRC or is in VAT registered and is essentially committing tax evasion or VAT fraud, then you lose your right to reclaim that VAT on your VAT return. And
so why would a supplier do this? So if they're charging the VAT and they're under the VAT threshold, it doesn't sound sophisticated enough for businesses that are so small. So would bigger businesses do this and not be VAT registered?
Okay. So on a really small scale, if we think about cash-based businesses like hairdressers, takeaways, it's not uncommon for them to have what we would call two drawers, where they put cash into one drawer.
Newsagents do this.
Newsagents, things like that. So when you're thinking about
really small
businesses...
There was a guy in Manchester when I used to work, got banged up. He had a chain of 25 newsagents across Manchester, and this was massive, and he did the whole two-till thing, and he just had his whole thing running through 1-2. He went to prison.
Yeah. So essentially, if you think that a supplier is charging you VAT, so they send you an invoice that's got VAT on it, but then maybe they don't declare that VAT on their VAT return, they're committing VAT fraud.
Right.
But because they've committed the VAT fraud, you also become responsible because you are in a connected supply chain. It means you cannot reclaim that VAT fraud. But more
importantly, legally?
Legally.
How would I know?
Well, this is where it becomes incredibly difficult, because you become responsible for your entire supply chain. And I think when we're in business, bigger businesses are great at this, checking their customers. I think small businesses don't even really do a lot of due diligence on their customers, let alone their suppliers.
Is this the only place that I can think a similar principle exists is around insurances? So like liability insurances, where you have to check that your contractors, your suppliers within your business have the various public liability insurances, and that is on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a similar sort of concept.
It is a similar sort of concept, but where this gets really quite scary, I'd say, is that the Kittel principle, basically, it's named after a court case that happened, I think it was in 2006 with a Belgian company. Anyway, the details are not relevant, and that's where it gets its name from. And basically, HMRC, the law states that if you knew or should have known that this transaction was connected to VAT fraud, then you're liable. And I think it's that knew or should have known. Yeah. Now, the most recent case that I was reading about it's called Power versus HMRC. And it refers to this drinks wholesaler. And this guy was essentially sourcing drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, from suppliers and selling them on to news agents and to, events companies and things like that. And HMRC kind of said, look, when they looked at this, firstly, this guy was meeting his supplier in a car park often. He'd literally meet him in a car park in a lay-by and collect drinks.
Okay.
When you look at that, you think, okay, that doesn't quite meeting somebody in a car park. Is that normally how you would do business?
I don't know. If you look at, I was listening to something recently about a fishmonger in Billionaires who literally he meets the two vans. One van meets from the fish market, the other van, they meet halfway. And we used to do this a lot in the newspaper. Yeah. We used to meet van to van halfway to swap things over and but it's fair that one thing alone doesn't make it VAT fraud, but it's a red flag that was ignored. Regularly meeting your supplier in a car park, followed by regularly there was no paperwork, there was no quoting process, there was no dynamic pricing, there was, none of these things made it look like that this was a legitimate business arrangement going on. And I think this is why this is so difficult and often not talked about, is because even when you Google this and you can go on some of the really big consultancy websites and say, okay, what do I need to do to protect my business? And it's very, very difficult to protect your business from this. Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so bloody scary, is that, you could have somebody 4 or 5 links down your supply chain that commits VAT fraud, and all of a sudden you're held liable for it. Not only do you get your VAT claim declined by HMRC,
on just that particular transaction? Or
those transactions. So okay. the transactions that are associated with the VAT fraud. And there is an element of HMRC to prove which transactions they are as well. So right. There is a high burden in this. But more scarily, there have been more cases lately where HMRC have said the directors of the business are responsible for putting processes and procedures in place and ensuring that their business, this doesn't happen in their business, and therefore the directors are liable.
Right.
So you get your VAT claim denied, and then HMRC levied fines on both the business and the director personally.
Okay. Yeah. Scary.
And that is why it's quite scary. So this particular case with Power versus HMRC, I think they had about £1 million of VAT disallowed, and they levied about £90,000 penalty on the director personally as well.
All right. So I think I get clearly what the issue is here. So let's give some juicy value here, Claire, to the listeners. What can they do? What should they be putting in place that's not going to burden them too much, but just simple things that they can follow and do to help just identify whether they are part of one of these chains and problems?
Yeah. So the first thing is to not underestimate the power of your gut. If something seems too good to be true, you can't buy often, something doesn't sound right. Something's a bit dodgy. It doesn't feel right. And
dig a bit deeper. Start with that. Yeah.
Or just walk away from it. Often there are plenty of suppliers you can go to. If something is markedly under the price of your other suppliers and yet they're charging you VAT, is there a possibility that it's because they're actually not paying that VAT over to HMRC and that's going straight in their pocket?
Yeah.
So, okay. If pricing doesn't seem right and things like that, if something seems too good to be true, it could be. So don't underestimate the power of your gut. And if something doesn't seem right, dig deeper.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to walk away. That would be my number one. But the most basic thing that businesses can do is to have some sort of supplier check-in process, a little bit like a process you would go through when you bring a new customer on board. Just do some simple checks to validate that supplier. So if they're VAT registered, you can go on, just Google, check a UK VAT number, and it was a gov.uk website. You just put the VAT number in and you'd know if that person is VAT registered. That would be the most basic check that everybody should be doing.
Yeah.
And I would say you should be doing that as a minimum every 12 months. But if you've got higher value suppliers, maybe you could categorize your suppliers into high and low value, and your high value you might do every quarter. And It really doesn't take that long to do. There are also some bookkeeping systems where you can get this built in as well. So
I'm
you
going to
don't
add
need
some
to do
value
anything.
here. You can actually make this part of other things you need to check with that supplier. We were talking about insurances earlier. So you should have a really just a one-page checklist, an onboarding supplier checklist that goes through these things from the VAT perspective. But also, if that supplier is coming on site delivering goods to your warehouse, they should have public liability insurance to the right amount and all those type of things. And you can tick that box at the same time, which is another thing that I'm sure a lot of business owners are probably not doing as they should be.
And I think some small business owners probably listening to this, rolling their eyes, thinking, I haven't got time for this, I'm busy making money. And I totally agree. Am I checking all of my suppliers? Absolutely not. Am I doing due diligence on Google? No, I'm not. But there are some suppliers that are critical to me and I'm spending quite a lot with that I think I want some more information on you.
Yeah.
And I think
it's about selecting the right suppliers to make sure you're protected against.
You don't need these robust processes in place for every single supplier. You need to be a bit selectful, and it might be based on the purchase value or the annual purchase value or something like that you make a decision, whatever is right for your business. But particularly, this is quite rife in the construction industry around labour as well. It's not just VAT that this applies to. If you've got like subcontractors, potentially you've got PAYE liabilities for them and things like that you could get caught out with. So particularly in the construction industry, this is quite important. And if you're in the construction industry, there are loads of things you should be checking. If you're employing an electrician, you need to make sure they're correctly qualified and that they've got the health and safety requirements and all those types of things as well. So actually you've probably already got some sort of supplier or subcontractor onboarding process and you just need to add the VAT checks into it.
Great.
So you can, as well as checking their VAT number easily on gov.uk, you can also check on Companies House. Just, check that the information this person is providing to you is correct. If they say they're a limited company, are they registered with Companies House? Have they filed their accounts? Are they all up to date and things like that?
What about are they VAT registered? Is that a basic one?
Well, if you check,
is that on Companies House?
Yeah, it's not on Companies House, but you can check the register on gov.uk, as I just said. So you can just Google validate a UK VAT number, and it will come up. It's gov.uk. You don't need to pay for that; it's completely free. And then, like I say, when you're taking on a bigger supplier, somebody that's going to be, has got more monetary value in your business or is more important to your supply chain, then just have maybe a 2-tier process where members of your team can onboard a normal supplier, but perhaps the director or somebody more senior needs to be checking over those bigger suppliers.
Okay, yeah.
So the most basic thing you should do is just check your suppliers when you onboard them.
Just do a basic.
And then regularly check them. This is not a one and done because...
And where would this function, this onboarding process, where does it best sit in the business? Because obviously, like I said, the business owner is going to look at this saying, no chance I'm doing that. Is it sit well with the bookkeeper or somebody like that, or... where would you put it?
Well, in big businesses, it would be, you would have like this 2-step approach. You would have purchasing, normally would do initial due diligence checks and check that this is a supplier that we want to work with. And then finance would normally step in and do some of these due diligence checks around, let's validate the bank account is who they say the bank account is. Let's validate the VAT number. Are they illegal? All of those types of things. Are they a limited company? So it really, in small businesses, is this is an admin task.
Any admin support,
set up a simple checklist, check the VAT number, check on Companies House.
Most small businesses
anything else
will
you want
have
to check.
Admin support, bookkeeper, or a PA, or someone like that. Any of those functions, it'd sit quite well with. So just build a process. You only have to train it once, and then that's what they follow. Yeah, I think it's just good practice.
Another good thing that you can do is you can add into your terms and conditions as well. You can just have a simple supplier contract and just make sure that it's written in your terms and conditions that the supplier must disclose to you if they have any dealings with HMRC around fraud or any open VAT cases or anything like that. You can write that into your contract. And at the end of the day, the clause around this is that you are liable if you knew or should have known. Yeah. So if you've got these processes in place, if this does happen and you get caught up in VAT fraud, then you could say to HMRC, look, we've got these processes in place. We did our best to onboard this supplier. We checked them every 6 months and we have this in our terms and conditions. And therefore, essentially we are a victim of their fraud as well.
Yes, you can defend yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, but if you're just doing absolutely nothing and you get caught up in this, and HMRC are going to say, well, do you know what? You should have known better.
Yeah, you tried nothing at all
You tried nothing to prevent this.
Anything's better than nothing, isn't it, as a defence, I guess. So.
But my number one tip is to just Google the business and Google...
Just find out about them,
Other search engines are available, of course. Google the business, but Google the company directors. Because it's often the company directors that would be listed on a HMRC tribunal case. So if ever they've had dealings with HMRC that have resulted in a court case or anything like that, then the details will be public and you can find out. So, Google them, look at the PR they've got, look at what other businesses are saying about them, look at the reviews they've got.
I mean, in some cases,
it paints a picture.
If you're picking a supplier, it should be a basic process anyway, and those red flags should come off. I mean, you don't just pick any old supplier, do you? You know.
Unfortunately, a lot of businesses will pick the cheapest supplier.
Which in itself is a red flag, isn't it? In some cases, it's difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
Because until you've had your fingers burned, you don't necessarily realise where the pitfalls are. And I think that's
the type of people that listen to us are, of a size and experience that they know the cheapest isn't always, and
the
often
directors
not the
are.
best.
I agree. The business owners are often very capable and understand that. But it's this: as your business grows, you've got staff that you're delegating decision making to every day, and it's, do those staff understand why it's important to select the right supplier? And I think that's why businesses often get caught out in this. But yeah, I think go with your gut, rely on Google a lot, and just have a simple process, a simple checklist for onboarding your suppliers and making sure they are who they say
somebody
they
who
are.
can stay consistent with it within the business.
Yeah, 100%.
Love it. Thanks for that. Well, that's interesting. It's something I definitely didn't know about. I'm sure nobody else did. As you said, it's it's a little known fact out there, but some really, really implementable tips there for businesses. So let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra. So this week I've got a book recommendation that I'm exactly halfway through. Really like this. So the book is called Taxtopia, and it's by The Rebel Accountant is the author.
And you've been dead into this, haven't you, Simon? You have literally not put this book down since you picked it up.
Yeah, it's definitely a page turner. It was a recommendation that I heard, and it's just fascinating. So the author is anonymous for obvious reasons. Through my working out based on the bits he's given away in the book, I'd say he's in his early to mid 40s, and he's worked since university as an accountant, a tax accountant, starting with one of the big four companies like the Ernst & Youngs and the guys like that, PwC.
I don't think this guy is anonymous. I think this might just be a bit of a marketing ploy, because at the very back of the book, it does say that he's available for public speaking. So, it'd be quite recognisable, I guess, on a public stage.
Yeah, maybe.
So.
But I guess on a larger scale, he doesn't want to identify. And the stories he tells, the clients he tells, he's changed names and various things like that. But basically, the book talks very much about, you call them shocking or just call it the world, but how the world works around mainly tax avoidance. So legal tax avoidance schemes for big businesses. It's quite a good book to read when you go through life thinking that, taxes are being hit at you, because actually you start to realise that actually the tax system is quite well geared towards supporting better off people, more wealthy businesses and things like that. And actually it isn't geared as much as, the narrative is from main government, that it makes it feel like working people are being propped up. Actually, you realise that there's lots going on in the background that you don't know about. So it's an interesting book. It's fascinating.
I think when you say it's geared towards richer people, I think that maybe that's not entirely accurate. I think it's more that, our tax laws are very, very historical. A lot of them are like hundreds of years old, and they just get updated. And there's an example in the book around yachts. If you're a billionaire and you can afford a mega yacht, you can moor it in international waters and not be subject to tax in any country. But it's like that tax loophole exists because the tax laws predate yachts.
No, I think I was more talking about it flips your mindset. I'd never really thought about the difference between product taxes and income taxes. So with income taxes, yes, we think, richer people are getting hit because the more you earn, the more you pay tax. But actually, what you fail to recognise is that actually it's poorer people that get hit harder with taxes because of product taxes. And if you think now about it's in the tens of, possibly even hundreds of duties and taxes, from insurance premium levy to alcohol tax to cigarette tax. And these taxes are, absolutely hit the poorer as a percentage of their income way harder than richer and wealthier people. So it actually gives you a little bit of, actually maybe I am a bit better off than I think I am just because I'm taxed higher on income. Actually, when I look at the broader picture, actually it's these hidden stealth taxes across products that are now getting way out of control that are actually really painful, because what proportion of a person's income on 20 grand a year is going on those product taxes versus somebody on 50 grand? Well, it's the same numerical value, but as a percentage of their earnings.
Yeah,
it's
like
making them
the
poorer.
tax on a pint is a tax on the pint,
exactly,
regardless whether you earn 20 grand or 50 grand.
So it actually makes you feel, I can't think of the word, more thankful of the tax regime than if you're a higher earner.
What can we learn from Taxtopia then? Well, it sounds like it might make you feel a little bit better if you're maybe a 40 or 45% taxpayer.
That's what I would say about it. It makes you feel a bit better if you're a higher rate taxpayer.
But probably, I think that the main thing that I took from this book was to earn more money so I can be one of these mega rich people that has yachts, private jets,
that's where
watches,
that is
cars,
where the real
all of these
tax
types of
breaks
things,
from.
because there are so many blooming loopholes available. I mean, I'm not a tax specialist at all. Obviously, I do have more tax knowledge than the average person, but even still, it was a little bit of an eye-opener to me, because there's just these little loopholes that you just don't realise exist. So this has really spurred me on to become a billionaire so that I can have my own tax specialist working for me and take advantage of all these tax loopholes. So roll on that mega yacht.
I think the interesting thing about the book is that it is also entertaining. It's wrote to be funny, entertaining, shocking but entertaining, and I think it just makes for a really good read, because it's not tax can be a dry subject. This is not a dry book. It's very interesting.
Well, I think this is something that a lot of people don't realise, but there's tax specialists that like doing tax returns, and then there's tax specialists who
treat it as a game.
As a game, and these people are highly creative and they are playing this, they've got to be creative and come up with these wacky and wonderful schemes. So actually those people will write really interesting books. This is not like writing a book written by a HMRC inspector, that's for sure.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for joining us for this week's podcast. As always, if you want to pop over to the YouTube channel for more insightful education to help you grow your business, then please do. It's Profit Cash Growth. You can also jump on the website. If you think you've outgrown your current accountant and you want Claire and her team to help you guys out, go to profitcashgrowth.com.
And if I could just ask one favour, we are putting a bit of money into advertising on YouTube, and it is a new avenue for us. So if you see our advert on YouTube, please do let us know, because that will just really help us know that we are selecting the right audience and the right metrics, because anybody that's tried to do Google advertising will know that it's quite complicated, and trying to find the right sort of algorithm to get your advert to the right people is difficult. So if you've seen our advert, you'll know, because it's me asking, have you outgrown your accountant? If you've seen that, please do just drop us a message or drop us an email and let us know, so we know that we're putting it in the right place.
And we'll see you again next week.